MicroLive. Now, this week we're looking at a disaster from 20 years ago and seeing how this computer model would help if it happens again. We take to the air with British Airways to follow their information network around the world.
And we find out how computer-assisted learning is moving into nurseries as 3-year-olds put software through its paces.
On the 18th of March 1967, the Torrey Canyon was carrying 100,000 tonnes of crude oil. She ran at full speed into the Seven Stones Reef off the Isles of Scilly. Oil immediately gushed from her damaged hull and drifted towards the beaches of Cornwall. Pollution on this scale had never happened before, and there was no clear strategy for dealing with it. Every available drum of detergent was sent to the area, and the Royal Navy organised a fleet of small ships. There was a desperate attempt to disperse the oil while it was still at sea, but in places the slick was almost 2 feet thick. By the end of the week, the oil started to come ashore. It fouled the beaches and killed thousands of seabirds. The only hope was for salvage tugs to tow the tanker off the reef while most of the oil was still aboard. But the attempt failed. The tanker broke her back and the remaining cargo flooded into the sea. There was now no way of stopping the oil from reaching the beaches, and every tide brought in more. Finally, 10 days after she went aground, the ship was blown up. But it was too late. The oil had already escaped. As the Torrey Canyon burnt, Britain faced an environmental catastrophe.
Now, when the Torrey Canyon went aground, plans to avert further disaster were hastily made. And although much of the effort was wasted, important lessons were learned. In particular, the need for good coordination. If the same thing happened today, 20 years later, things should be very different. A lot more is now known about how slicks can be broken up. A slick can be spotted much more easily from the air, and therefore dispersant sprayed from an aircraft will be much more accurate. In Britain, the Department of Transport has a fleet of specially equipped spraying aircraft kept on permanent 30-minute standby. This control room is the headquarters of the government's Marine Pollution Control Unit. It's run by Admiral Michael Stacey, and it's from here that both the spraying aircraft and efforts on the ground would be coordinated. But just keeping track of a slick is far from easy. Anything from the size of the waves to the type of oil can affect the way that it moves, and of course it can't be followed at night. So, for the past 3 years, the unit has been using a computer modelling system that can take account of all the variables and produce very rapid forecasts of the slick's movements.
And this is the system that Admiral Stacey and his colleagues are using. It's running on a Plessey microvac, so it's well out of the PC league, and indeed it needs to be. Mike Unsworth from Cycon wrote this software, so Mike, what can it do?
Well, this is an oil spill simulation system which is used to model the behaviour of oil at sea. The system takes into account oil evaporation, dispersion, spreading, and also advection due to winds and tides.
Right, now I recognise the coastline of Cornwall there. What else can we see on the screen?
That's right. Well, we can also see an asterisk which denotes the position of the Torrey Canyon itself, and the blue area around it is oil which has leaked out of the tanker and is moving in a southeasterly direction.
Of course, there are different types of oil. What does the computer need to know about this particular type?
Yes, well, the oil characteristics are quite important, and the system needs to know about the evaporation, spreading and dispersion properties for the oil that's been spilt.
Out of all these variables, what predictions can it make?
Well, the system predicts the amount of oil that's out at sea and also the amount of oil that's beached on the coastline.
Does it work?
Yes, the system has been validated against laboratory experiments and also against real incidents such as the Torrey Canyon one.
Well, thank you, Mike. Well, earlier today we did test it to see if it works. We asked the computer to plot out its version of what happened 20 years ago. Here's the result. These are printouts from a colour plotter. And you can see the oil slick spreading out southeast from the tanker. With a slight northwesterly wind, it looks for a while as if the oil might miss the beaches altogether. The slick even shows some signs of breaking up. But now comes a change. A southwesterly gale springs up and the oil heads for Cornwall. In fact, by the Friday night, the first oil, shown here in red, did come ashore. Throughout the weekend, the oil comes ashore in large quantities and spreads along the north coast as well. On Sunday nights, the tanker breaks its back and releases still more oil. But another northwesterly gale drives most of it out to sea. In the changing winds, a little more oil does come ashore, but most of it is dispersing in the English Channel. And almost 3 weeks after the accident, oil is spread along more than 100 miles of coast. On this chart, we've marked where the oil was actually cleared from the beaches. Compared with a computer model, it shows some oil rather further north, beyond Newquay. Now, of course, this chart is based on where the oil was actually cleared from, so it doesn't include inaccessible places, inaccessible coves and rocks such as these down here. Obviously, the main effort went into clearing the tourist areas. Along the south coast here, the oil got as far as the Lizard, which is exactly what the computer predicted. Well, that's what did happen 20 years ago, but Mike is now starting another run, and this time he's feeding in the actions that Admiral Stacey thinks his unit would take today. Later, we'll find out if that strategy is any better.
A yellow round one.
A red one.
Rolling that out. Just see how many you can fit on, all right? That's it. The first few years of a child's life are very physical. They like to touch, to press, to push, to pull, to climb on things. And where better to get that sort of experience than in a well-run playgroup? Well, here at Waldeck Nursery in West London, they've got all the usual equipment. But the children here have got something else to play with as well. A £40 Electron with an ordinary TV and tape recorder. A whole keyboard of buttons to press, bright colours and pictures to make. Even before the children understand the games, there's the physical pleasure of choosing keys and pressing them. I was surprised at just how easily the children seem to have taken to the technology, a view shared by Jane Harris, one of the teachers here at Waldeck.
Yes, it's amazing how quickly they do learn to work it. They have to learn a couple of things, of course, to be able to use the computer. They have to learn that each game has its own rules for a start, which could be confusing. They don't find it confusing. And they've also got to learn to be adept with the keys.
And that comes fairly quickly?
It comes amazingly quickly, yes.
Do you teach them how to use the computer? I mean, do you sit them down and show them what to do?
Well, we tried that in the beginning. That's not the time-efficient way to do it at all. We find that it's much easier if the children just stand and watch while someone else is playing, and then they pick it up that way. Or one child on their own might just learn how to do it through trial and error.
Each time Alison presses a key, Ben copies it and gets the reward of more of the picture. Sometimes Alison has to count along the keys to get the right number, and others she can recognise right away.
Finished.
But they're only playing very simple games, aren't they?
Oh, you'd be surprised. No, certainly not. We are amazed at the amount of complex games they can do. Whatever we put in front of them, at some level or another, they seem to be able to do it. We started off by giving them really easy things, gradually introduced the others, and they seem to be able to cope with numbers, shapes, colours, matching, grids, everything.
Now, what am I supposed to do with this, Alison? How do you start playing it?
1.
Number 1. Right, and why have I got to press a number 1? So you're matching up the pairs. And do you find that an easy thing to do?
Yes.
You do? Right, you do the next one then.
2.
You can't just load up the first piece of educational software that you can lay your hands on and hope that it's going to work for children of Anna's age. The software's got to be very carefully chosen and carefully written. For a start, children of Anna's age can't read, so obviously a screen full of written instructions is going to be completely lost on them. In fact, it would probably turn them off the whole idea. Then the less key presses they have to make, the better, and the keys should be easily recognisable. And some software packages include a guide, a sort of template that points up the keys, the ones that they should press. Why do you like this game?
Because it's got numbers in.
And you like being able to recognise the numbers, do you?
Because I don't know how to count. I do all wrong when I count. I mix up all the numbers.
You don't do it wrong now, do you?
No, because when I've got a counting game, I don't do it wrong.
One of the games was written especially for the nursery by Jane's husband. It looks deceptively simple. It involves a rubbish collector who has to be guided around the maze, tidying up by collecting tin cans and apple cores. But working out a route through the maze is a form of problem solving, and it takes a lot of concentration and thought before any of the keys can be pressed. They seem to spend an awful lot of time sitting in front of the screen.
Well, it does depend on how difficult the child finds the game. If the child finds it an easy game, he won't sit for very long. If he finds it too difficult, he won't sit for very long. But if it's just right, then he'll stay there, play it maybe 2 or 3 times over. And that's really training his concentration. He learns to sit and concentrate on one thing for quite a long time.
Without realising he's doing it, presumably?
Yes. And then that will carry over to other games, other activities that he's doing.
And you obviously feel this is a great advantage to children in later life, in their school life and things.
Well, I do think that a child going into school has a lot of problems to face, and if he goes with a good concentration span, that's half the battle won almost. I mean, he's going to have no problems with learning if he can sit down by himself and concentrate on his work.
Well, whether an individual child plays with a computer or not really doesn't matter. The fact that there's one in the corner of the room makes it part of the furniture, and therefore it's part of their everyday lives. Of course, the shape of computers and what they can do will have changed radically by the time these children grow up. But one thing's for sure, unlike many of my generation, these budding adults will never be intimidated by the chip or tomorrow's technology.
One problem Waldeck Nursery had was finding suitable software. Some of their children are under 3 and can only use the very simplest programs. The high street stores don't seem to offer much help these days. They learned long ago you don't get rich selling educational software, and they never did offer the kind of expertise to be able to advise. Well, here's one answer: to browse through magazines like these. They sometimes carry useful reviews of educational software, or you could try looking through the small ads at the back. But of course, there's no guarantee that what you'll find there is any good. Some software houses do have a good name for educational games. One of them is Mirrorsoft, with their popular Mr. Men programs. They come for a wide range of home micros. This one, the Mr. Men Magic Story Maker, introduces pre-reading and writing concepts, and it got some rave reviews. Basically, the child has to build up a scene by choosing from locations. We'll have the garden, why not? Who should we have in it? Mr. Small. And at first, the child is choosing from these icons at the bottom of the screen. We'll have a rainy day, and we'll have him sad. Fair enough. To begin with, that seems quite simple, just choosing from the pictures. But later, you can select another option from this menu here. Let's choose option 5. And here you see we're actually beginning to type, to read and write, to build up our scene. So it's a game that would suit a wide range of age and ability. And another highly recommended software house is ESM, Educational Software for Microcomputers. Like Mirrorsoft, their packages include a parent's book with further ideas. This program is Colorcopter, which explores matching and sorting activities with shapes, colours and with words. All I've got to do is decide which colour that is. Well, it looks to me as though it's blue, so I select the blue key here, and off goes the Colorcopter to sort it for me. That's in the early stages. I use this template, but there are a variety of others. As I get more advanced, I can identify the colour from the initial, and later by reading the word itself. So, again, what starts as a simple matching activity turns into a reading game. In our programme notes this month, we've compiled a list of helpful addresses if you're looking for educational software, including publishers who, of course, will be happy to send you their catalogues. And this retailer's catalogue is quite useful too. It's free, just the postage to pay, and inside it, Rickett Educational Media have listed all their primary stock with full descriptions and screenshots. Now, because they're not tied to any particular software house, their recommendations should be unbiased. They'll even give you advice over the phone for your particular child. Their address is also in our notes.
Hello. My name is Lesley Judd, and my executive card number is 405318. I've got to go to Miami on business. Can you give me some details of flights, please?
I'll just check the availability for you. Won't keep you a moment.
An airline wants to be able to respond quickly and accurately to a customer, and that's why they're investing heavily in improving their computer systems.
British Airways flight leaving Heathrow at 11:20.
British Airways have over 450 terminals in this one Heathrow reservation centre alone. The operators have virtually instant access to the database and passenger handling systems. They make over 3 million bookings a year, yet reservations is only one part of a highly complex operation. The airline has 160 planes flying to over 70 countries. As a new jumbo can cost $100 million, the time in the air has to be kept to a maximum and the time on the ground to a minimum. Modern airlines work on very narrow profit margins, and they have to be very carefully and efficiently coordinated. All the operations of the airline are planned and monitored by an operations control centre. The plans drawn up here spread out to affect all aspects of the airline. Timescales vary enormously. In the maintenance hangars, the routine servicing and engineering work has to be organised months in advance. On the other hand, the so-called ground operations, the baggage, food and so on, need instant access to information right up to the moment of takeoff. At the same time, the system has to be fully flexible to respond to sudden changes in demand, bad weather, air traffic congestion and much more. There are advantages of scale for a big airline, but only if it is run efficiently. The difference between profit and loss can depend on how well it deploys and monitors its resources. The management information system is one key to survival in today's cutthroat airline business. BA's computer system is already one of the biggest in Europe, and it's growing at over 30% a year. The typical pattern is more electronic systems and fewer management and administrative staff. The systems run on an array of 12 mainframes. Together they can handle 125 million instructions per second. There are over 800 disk drives, each with between 300 and 600 megabytes of storage. Yet any item of information can be retrieved from the data banks in less than 1/20th of a second. And still, that's not enough to meet future plans. Computer systems are now being used as a competitive weapon in the battle for customers.
Good morning. Can I have your tickets and your passports, please? Thank you.
The airline is hoping to get ahead of its rivals by using the computer network to improve customer service at, say, the check-ins.
Well, the system already knows about me from when I reserved my ticket. And that's what information networks are really all about. Collecting information, storing it, and getting it to those people who need it.
As check-in assistants spend less time on the terminals, they can be more attentive to the needs of the passengers, and that's good for business.
And the information about all the passengers will follow us right through the journey.
It's been calculated that a 747 takes on 28,000 items for a single trip. The computer system has been used to schedule personnel and equipment for the ground operations without wasted time and effort. The briefings for the flight crew are prepared in advance on a computer system which calculates the most efficient route to give the minimum fuel consumption, the minimum operating costs, and the minimum time. The system saves hours of routine work, and the full briefing is available to the crew when they arrive on duty.
Well, that. So the tracks are to the south. No turbulence showing en route. Very full load. And that's maximum payload flight plan.
So we're still going west.
Yeah, you're still flying.
The flight crew used to spend a lot more time working on the flight plan for themselves. Information about the passengers is being updated as they go through the boarding gate. There's a security system in operation to make sure the same passengers board the plane as check in. When boarding is complete, a summary gives the final weight and balance for the aircraft. As the plane prepares for takeoff, the information network sends details about the flight and the passengers to Miami so that they can organize for its arrival in 9 hours' time. To a modern airline, information in the air is just as important. Well, the impact of computers on the flight deck has been enormous. There has been literally a revolution in the way that planes are flown. At the heart of the instrumentation of a modern 747 is the Flight Management System, or FMS for short. It's run on a pair of onboard computers. At the moment, it's looking at the details of today's passenger and cargo load and comparing the figures with those on the final load sheet. But if that was all the FMS was used for, it wouldn't be very special. However, the FMS is also the navigational computer. It contains information about all the routes. Over land, the route consists of a number of so-called legs between radio beacons. The FMS looks up the details of these beacons in its database and tunes into them automatically. It uses signals from several beacons to calculate the position of the plane. It feeds the course corrections directly to the autopilot. Over the sea, where there are no radio beacons, the FMS navigates using the onboard inertial guidance system. In this field, as in many others, the technology doesn't stand still. There's now a new generation of aircraft flying on these short and medium-haul routes. Planes like the A310 Airbus and the 757. And to go with this new generation of aircraft, there's a new generation of advanced flight simulators.
OK, Mike, we'll put in the position.
Inside, the flight deck is an exact replica of the real plane.
Bravo 21.
The movements and displays are being driven by a dedicated mini-computer. Crews receive the majority of their training for the 757 on the simulator.
Checks OK.
And they soon realize that flying the 757 is a very different experience from their previous aeroplanes. For instance, most of the conventional instruments have been replaced by VDUs. But on a 757, the changes go much deeper.
Positive climb, gear up.
The flight management system is fully integrated into the flying systems. Not only does it control the navigation, it displays the route on a VDU screen. And at the same time, the FMS decides the altitude and so flies the plane fully automatically. There's one less person on the flight deck. No flight engineer. The performance of all the engineering systems is controlled and monitored by the computers, even in an emergency.
Direct track begin.
The crew fly the plane through the FMS, and it has been suggested that their jobs are being de-skilled. The crews argue that using the FMS means less routine work, and so less pressure and less tiredness. They have more time to manage the plane, to look around and to fly.
Speed brakes. Armed. Auto brakes. You've chosen 2.
At the same time, the crew are still trained to fly the plane fully manually if necessary. The combination has led to an improvement in safety. Worldwide, the airline business is expanding as more of us travel on business or consider exotic places like Miami for our holidays. But the far-flung nature of airline operation is in itself a problem. The information network has to stretch out to all the places that BA operates from. The ground operations at Miami, like those at Heathrow, are still scheduled centrally from London. And it's not just the ground operations.
When you check in at Miami, the processing isn't done locally, but back in London. It's linked by a worldwide telecommunications network using satellite, cable and microwave facilities.
Terminals in over 100 countries can access the system with a response time of 2 or 3 seconds. The network is expensive, but it makes sense in commercial terms to have all the information available centrally with easy access for everybody. However, as the business changes, so must the information network.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Going to London?
Yes.
At Miami, BA is experimenting with personal computers in place of dumb terminals. With information like seat allocations computed locally, it's cheaper and quicker, and there are better displays. Also, information is readily available to local managers. The local network only communicates with London when necessary.
I have a window seat, but it's over the wing.
There are plans to link all the North American operations together in one network, and so improve the quantity and quality of information available to managers. It's all part of a trend. While the central database will be maintained, more and more intelligence and processing will be distributed around the network.
BA is looking very carefully at the exact information support it needs.
It has been argued that airlines in general have lost their place in the forefront of information technology. But now airlines like BA realise that they must make their operations more efficient, that they must improve customer services, and to do that, they must have the best possible distributed information network.
And now back to our simulation of how modern methods might cope with the Torrey Canyon disaster. Mike, first of all, what are those modern methods?
Well, the main method is to use aircraft to spray the oil with dispersant. And here we've simulated 7 aircraft spraying during the day.
Now, the model doesn't make recommendations, does it? So how does it help?
Well, first of all, it allows us to track the oil at night when it's difficult to see. And it also allows us to use different combat strategies and see which are the most effective.
Right, we're now 288 hours into our simulation. At this stage in real life, the oil was all over those beaches. How are we doing now?
That's right. Well, we still do have some oil on the beaches, but nowhere near to the extent in the previous run.
Yes, I think just make out just down there, those red blobs are the oil, and it tells me over this side of the screen that's 51 tonnes. That's a mere fraction of the 1,200 tonnes that was dispersed along the coast. How sure are you that this is an accurate prediction?
Well, this system really represents state-of-the-art in oil spill modelling, and in this case we've used accurate data from the Met Office. However, the system is updated as research goes on in this area.
So you're constantly fine-tuning it.
That's right.
Of course, you've got a very expensive, very capable computer here. Would it work on a smaller system?
Yes, in fact, Cycon are shortly to release a system which is based on a PC, and we're hoping that that will appeal to harbour masters and port authorities.
Good luck with that. Thank you very much, Mike.
And you don't have to be a harbour master to run Slick on a micro. Now, of course, it's not in the same league as the Cycon software, and it's not meant to be. But it does give you a chance to see if you could tackle similar sorts of problems, but on a much smaller scale. And because it's concerned with dramatic, real-life incidents, it's become very popular with pupils in schools.
Well, that's just about all for this week's programme. Next week is the last MicroLive with a specially extended edition starting a little earlier at 6:15. We'll be looking at the whole future of computing, both the research leading towards faster, more intelligent computers and some of the effects that computers could have on our lives. But until then, good night.